So what are you hearing? You were there last night talking to officials, talking to people down in the room after the debate. What are you hearing about last night and about what may happen from here?
Well, let's start here. The stakes of this election couldn't be higher. And the loudest voice saying that has been the Biden campaign, saying democracy itself is on the ballot. And they looked at this race. They saw a frozen race, a very static race. And to your point, Willie, they're the ones who wanted this early debate. They felt like they needed to grab Americans' attention, tell them this is your choice. It's Biden and it's Trump. You might not be happy about it, but here's where we are. Listen to Donald Trump. Let's remind you of why another 4 years of him would be so disastrous to this country. And they knew the bar that they had to clear was about Joe Biden's age and competency for the job. He cleared it at State of the Union. He did not clear it last night. And every aide that I've spoken to, Democrats are deeply worried about what they saw from the president. Yes, Trump lied. We will get into that. But the fundamentals here last night was that President Biden did not answer the bell. So I was here last night in Atlanta, Democrats scrambling. We had Vice President Harris, not scheduled to do any interviews last night, suddenly scrambled to do them on the cable networks, including MSNBC. We had aides about 45 minutes into the debate, suddenly blasting reporters' text messages telling us for the first time that President Biden had a cold, and that was explaining why he wasn't doing well. They pointed to his rally in North Carolina later today, saying that'll be a moment where he does do better. We had, at the moments after the debate, here in the spin room on the campus of Georgia Tech University, Republicans, the Trump surrogates, were out instantly, wanting to talk to anybody they could about how well their guy did last night. We had to wait 15, 20 minutes for anybody from the Biden campaign to show up. And when they did, they were subdued. Gavin Newsom, the California governor, was flat out asked if he would perhaps be the Democratic nominee instead of Joe Biden. He, of course, said no. He said he stood with President Biden. But John Hammond, that moment sort of captures where we are right now. This was not just the 2012 debate. President Obama, yes, he was bad that night, but he went into that debate ahead. Joe Biden was not ahead last night. He wasn't down by much. It was a close race, margin of error race. But he had to answer some questions, and he didn't. He didn't show up last night. So now, where do we go from here? So it's a two-part question. How does the Biden campaign try to right the ship to say, look, he's our guy? Or how do Democrats make the push to him to say, no, you're not. We need to go another direction?
I'll just start by saying that just without having opinionizing about this. As a matter of fact, having covered presidential debates since 1992, and having seen a fair number of bad nights for candidates on first debates, bad nights for incumbents, some bad nights for challengers, in terms of measuring the degree of alarm of a presidential candidate's party about their performance, I have never seen anything like this by an order of magnitude.
Yes.
This is a reporting matter. Sitting congressmen, sitting senators, sitting governors, millionaires, billionaires, across the spectrum, people who've been supportive and loyal to Joe Biden from day one and continue in some respects to be supportive and loyal to Joe Biden, freaking out last night. I can't, as a reportorial matter, I can't overstate the degree of freakout about what they were seeing. I don't know what is going to happen now, but I will tell you that by the time you got to the first commercial break at the highest levels of the Democratic Party, senators, governors, congresspeople, biggest bundlers, biggest donors, there were conversations about what do we do now? We need to figure out how that works. And there's a story the other day in the totally non-credible, in many respects, Daily Mail, I think, a couple weeks ago, on Monday, that said that the Clintons, the Obamas, Schumer and Pelosi were going to watch this debate, and if it did not go well for Joe Biden, they were going to go and try to have the talk with him about stepping back. Many people laughed at that. It was not a credible report. You looked at the Daily Mail, British tabloid, whatever. I had about 6 good sources after that who said that's not totally false. And the interesting part of that was the Schumer and Pelosi piece, because no one thinks Joe Biden would listen to the Obamas, the Clintons on this subject. But because he cares so much about Democrats in the House and Senate, there was some discussion about whether Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer privately were at least taking soundings on this question. I don't know what will happen now going forward, but I will say these are the kinds of conversations that people are having now in the Democratic Party as we speak. What to do, because the level of panic is, for me, in my time covering politics, I've never seen a level of panic about this on this scale.
So Joe and Mika, to be clear, the Biden campaign defended their candidate's performance last night. They say he did draw that contrast he needed to with former President Trump, saying what a danger Trump would be to our democracy. But to illustrate John's point, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, who knows Michigan as well as anyone, who's a dear friend of President Biden's, she was my guest on Way Too Early a short time ago. I put it to her whether President Biden should remain the top of the ticket. She didn't want to answer. She didn't say. And that shows you where the party is right now.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.